Whatever you know about Tonga is just the tip of the iceberg, because underneath that paradise of palm trees and turquoise waters lies a royal legacy, unlike anywhere else in the Pacific. I'm talking sacred kings, power struggles, foreign drama, and even a passport scandal that nearly wrecked the nation's finances. That's right, in this video we'll take a journey to Tonga's past, uncover its beautiful geography, understand its economy, and explore the wonders of its traditions. So Tonga's story begins over 3,000 years ago, when the Lapita people sailed in from Southeast Asia. These early settlers came through what's now Indonesia and the Philippines, eventually landing in the remote corners of the South Pacific. They set up early villages in places like Toloa, where Tonga's airport is today, and Heketa, on the northeast tip of Tonga Tapu. By the 900s, Tonga had become a powerful kingdom. The Tui Tonga were sacred rulers, combining religious and political power. But over time, things got complicated. In the 1400s, a new royal line was created, the Tui Ha'atakalawa. Then, in the 1600s, a third line emerged, the Tui Kanokupolu, who would eventually become the main royal family. Then, in 1616, the Europeans came. The first ones to reach the island were Dutch explorers Jacob Lemaire and Wilhelm Schouten. But the most famous visitor came in 1773, Captain James Cook. He returned in 1777 and stayed for 2 months, charting the islands with incredible accuracy. The Tongans even threw him a massive feast in Lefuka. Cook called them the Friendly Islands. But little did he know some local chiefs were secretly plotting to raid his ships. Thankfully, a last-minute disagreement between leaders saved Cook, and he sailed away, never knowing how close he came to disaster. In 1781, Spanish navigator Don Francisco Morel claimed Vava'u for Spain, but the locals didn't take that well. In 1706, things turned violent. Tongans attacked, which propelled years of war and disorder. Eventually, a chief named Taufa Ahau rose to power. He converted to Christianity in 1831 and united the islands under one crown. In 1845, he became King George Tupu, the first, and officially formed the Kingdom of Tonga. He gave the country a constitution in 1875 and modernised the legal system. For the first time ever, Tonga was a united, independent kingdom. But in 1900, Tonga became a British protectorate, which means Tonga kept its kings and political structure, while Britain helped handle its foreign affairs. And fun fact, no other Pacific nation managed to do that. 18 years later, Tonga welcomed its new ruler, Queen Salote Tupou III. She ruled until 1965 and became one of the nation's most admired leaders. It wasn't until 1970 when Tonga regained its full independence and joined the Commonwealth. But by the 1990s, many Tongans were calling for change. A pro-democracy movement gained steam, led by leaders like Akilisi Pohiva. Tensions rose as people demanded more political voice. The government's response was to push back, sometimes arresting those who spoke out. Then came a bizarre twist. Between 1983 and 1991, the government sold thousands of passports to foreigners, raking in around $30 million. The money was funneled into a trust fund managed by Jesse Bogdanoff, an American financial advisor. Bogdanoff promised big returns, but the fund collapsed under mismanagement and shady investments. By the early 2000s, most of the money vanished, which further shook public confidence in royal leadership. So, now the big question is, how does a nation with royal power and foreign intrigue keep its identity alive? Well, to understand that, we have to explore the islands themselves. If you thought Tonga was just one tropical island, surprise, this kingdom actually stretches across 500 miles, or about 800 kilometres of open ocean, and is made up of about 170 islands. But only 36 of them are even inhabited, and they're scattered across the sparkling blue Pacific like tiny green gems. Tonga sits in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, between Fiji and Samoa, and is divided into 3 main island groups, Tonga Tapu in the south, Ha'apai in the centre, and Vava'u in the north. The capital city, Nuku'alofa, is on the island of Tonga Tapu, which is Tonga's largest and flattest island. It's actually a raised coral atoll, surrounded by protective reefs that create calm lagoons and white sand beaches. About 2/3 of Tonga's population lives here, and it's where most of the political action happens. In the middle of the country is Ha'apai, a group of quiet, dreamy islands that feel like time forgot them. But don't let the calm fool you. The highest point in all of Tonga is here, Mount Kau, a towering volcano that reaches over 3,300 feet, or 1,033 meters, into the sky. In fact, many of Tonga's islands sit on underwater volcanoes, forming two long chains, one made of high volcanic islands and the other made of low coral islands. Some of these volcanoes are still active. One of the most famous is Hunga Tonga, Hunga Ha'apai, which rose from the ocean in 2015 and exploded in 2022. With such force, it sent shockwaves around the entire planet and triggered a massive tsunami. To the north is Vava'u, where the landscape changes again. Here, rolling green hills, hidden caves, and steep cliffs create one of the most stunning spots in the Pacific. The landlocked harbour is perfect for sailing, and from July to October, humpback whales cruise these waters to give birth. If you're lucky, you might even see one breach just off the coast. And here's another cool fact. Tonga has no rivers, but some of the larger or older islands, like Eua and Nuku'alofa, do have small creeks and forested areas. Eua especially is a nature lover's dream. It has the oldest volcanic ridge in Tonga and is home to Eua National Park, where thick forests cover the eastern side of the island. It even has a forest reserve filled with trees like the toi and tavahi, and amazing wildlife like the red-breasted musk parrot and the blue-crowned lory, which are some of the prettiest birds in the Pacific. In terms of Tonga's climate, it's mostly semi-tropical, with warm temperatures year-round. But around June to July it drops to around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, or 16 to 21 degrees Celsius. And in the hotter months, like December and January, it hits about 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 27 degrees Celsius. And the farther north you go, the more tropical it feels. That's also where typhoons are most likely to hit, especially between December and April. But beyond the stunning landscape of the country, Tonga's heartbeat also comes from its people and the systems that help them thrive. So let's dive into Tonga's politics and economy, shall we? Tonga has had kings for more than 175 years. But this isn't just a land of royal rule and ancient customs. Since 2010, it's been a constitutional monarchy, which means the king still holds power. But now he shares the stage with elected leaders and a parliament that helps shape the country's future. All in all, it's a mix of tradition and change, where deep cultural roots meet a growing desire for people to have more of a say in how things are run. And that balance shows up in more than just politics, because when it comes to the economy, it's kind of like the islands themselves, small, spread out, and always adjusting to whatever comes next. Take this, for example. In December 2024, tourism saw a major boom. Hotels were full, shops were busy, and taxis barely had time to stop. Travel spending jumped nearly 30%. Still, tourism isn't actually what fuels Tonga's economy the most. That title goes to remittances, money sent home by Tongans living abroad. In the same month, those transfers topped $50 million. That cash helps families pay for food, school fees, and even big holiday feasts. And while all this was happening, Tonga's banking sector had a solid year. In 2024, loans hit a record $589 million, as more people borrowed to buy homes, vehicles, or invest in tourism projects. Deposits also climbed close to the $1 billion mark, thanks to stronger saving habits across households, businesses, and even the government. Lower interest rates also made it easier to borrow. Now, to give you a bigger picture, Tonga's entire GDP in 2023 was about $508 million, according to the World Bank, and it's expected to grow 2.5% in 2025. But even with all this momentum, Tonga knows it can't stop, especially since agriculture and local industries are still pretty fragile. So there's a push to ramp up production and attract more investment. And to do just that, the government's making it easier to start a business, get permits, and pay taxes. Here's how. In 2023, Tonga rolled out a national policy on consumer protection and competition to modernise the market, especially online. It also trimmed its list of restricted industries, making the country one of the most open economies in the South Pacific. And technology is playing a big part in Tonga's future. The country's teaming up with satellite companies to boost internet access, even on far-off islands. That changes everything for students, hospitals, resorts, and even tourists arriving by yacht, which, by the way, is one of the fastest growing markets here. Of course, being an island nation comes with risks. Cyclones, tsunamis, and long supply chains can shake things up. So Tonga's working hard to build stronger, more climate-resilient infrastructure, like roads, ports, and power systems that can handle whatever nature throws their way. The path ahead won't always be smooth, but with smart planning, bold ideas, and a little help from global partners, Tonga's setting itself up for a future that's more connected, more stable, and full of possibility. Which brings us to the next segment, Tonga's culture. About 97% of the population are Tongan, and ethnically, that means Polynesian, with a bit of Melanesian influence mixed in. But what really sets Tongan society apart is how deep the traditions go. Historically, it was highly structured, with a strong sense of hierarchy and sacred customs. Women held high social rank, passing it on to their children. Men, on the other hand, held power, often as chiefs. At the top of the old system was the king, or tui, followed by high chiefs, landowners, and warriors. Then came lower chiefs, working chiefs, and commoners called tua. At the very bottom were prisoners and slaves, known as popular. Today the king still rules, and while high chiefs no longer have the same influence, 33 noble titles remain, and many of those nobles hold important government roles. And interestingly enough, this social structure is reflected in their language. Depending on who you're talking to, you might use an entirely different form of Tongan. High-ranking individuals are spoken to in what's essentially a separate dialect, one that's formal, ceremonial, and sometimes only understood by hereditary orators. And while modern life continues to evolve, Tongans still take pride in living by their traditional ways, known as Anga Whakatonga, the Tongan way. So at the heart of their daily life are 4 core values: Whewhaka apa apa aki, which means mutual respect; Whewetokaiaki, the spirit of sharing and cooperation; Loto 2, showing humility and generosity; and Tauhi Waha'a, the commitment to loyalty and maintaining strong relationships. But this tradition extends to more than their values. In the villages, you'll see people wearing ta'ovala waist mats and kiki girdles, cooking in umu earth ovens, and gathering for kava ceremonies. Craftsmanship also runs deep here, from bone and wood carvings to basket and mat weaving. One of the most treasured practices is making ngatu, or bark cloth, using the inner bark of the mulberry tree. These pieces are hand-painted with symbols, and often given as gifts for births, weddings, or funerals. And then there's the dance, and Tongan dances are graceful, meaningful, and beautifully precise. Dancers wear feathered headpieces called teki teki and move in unison to sung poetry, telling stories with their hands. There are many styles like the tawalonga, maulu'ulu, soke, and the laka laka, which can involve dozens of people dancing in synchronized lines. And while the Christian missionaries put a stop to a lot of older traditions, one survived just below the surface: tattooing. In pre-Christian Tonga, men, except the king, were heavily tattooed. Their designs told stories, journeys, and status. The practice nearly disappeared, but it never vanished completely. Today, it's experiencing a quiet revival. Ultimately, this mix of old and new, sacred and everyday, that's what gives Tonga its unique identity. So now I want to know, where do you think Tonga's biggest strength lies? In its land, its leaders, or its traditions? Sound off in the comments section below, and if you enjoyed this video, you'll love this next one.